Hit us up on all social media at The Buffalo Pod.
Welcome back to the Center on Buffalo podcast. Our guest this week is the legend, John Murphy. And Murf was part of the Bills radio broadcast for 35 years, serving first as the color commentator and then later as the play-by-play man. He is in the Buffalo Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame as well as the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. He recently wrote a book about the history of the Bills and his time with the Bills titled If These Walls Could Talk. He recently announced his retirement from calling the broadcast, and it goes without saying that so many of us will miss his calls. Without further ado, Murf, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be with you.
It's always good to be with you. I miss spending more time with you, but let's start here. You've been working your tail off these last 17 months to get back in the booth. You've lost over 70 pounds. For those watching on YouTube, you look absolutely phenomenal. I'm proud of you in this journey that you've been on. But what led you to now make the decision to walk away from the play calling duties?
Well, I've done a lot of work, but it just taking too long, to get better. It takes too long to get my speech back, which I apologize for. It's not back all the way. But I figure it won't be all the way back in September. You can't go on without missing 2 games. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I decided to pull the plug and let go.
Well, there's no reason for you to apologize. We talked shortly after you had that stroke. My stepdad had a stroke and he was, he still struggles with his speech and, his quick recall. And my mom had a stroke and she got it back immediately. It's one of those things where, there's no rhyme or reason sometimes on how a stroke will affect people. And look, take your time in whatever capacity that you're in moving forward with the broadcast, we'll take it. And if that's simply, being around, that's great. But if we can have more involvement, that would be even better. And so you said you hope to be still involved with the broadcast. In an ideal world moving forward, what would that look like?
Well, I mean, the schedule will come out this week, and we don't know when it'll be, but I anticipate that we're playing in September. I think by September, if I'm feeling better, I think I should. I would like to do a brief editorial every week,
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Either in the booth or on the road, leave something, on tape on the road. When you're on the road, I think I could add just perspective of what the Bills are, where they are, and what to expect this year. I'm hoping that turns out to be the case.
Well, maybe we can do weekly segments on here too, where we get, kind of your thoughts on the game, because sure. I learned a lot stepping into the broadcast booth and even prepping for a radio broadcast of how much work there truly is. When I was calling college games prior, you got to learn the rosters and you got to do all that. And that was kind of the hardest part, calling college games. Well, stepping into the radio booth, the roster, especially the Bills roster. I just had gotten out of the NFL. I knew most of the rosters, but there was so much prep work that still needed to be done. You were at the time doing One Bills Live, so you're getting plenty of prep work then throughout the week. But there's so much prep work, and you can just add so much perspective with all the experience that you had in the booth. I want to know this. So you started out doing color commentary, which is what I'm doing with the radio broadcast now, and then you took over the play-by-play duties from Van Miller. How much harder is it to do play-by-play than simply provide the color for games?
It's harder, but it's more different, color, you had to think of themes and what the team would do and what they would try to do this week and how they played. Well, play-by-play, it's instant identification. I'm talking, yes, the home team is easy, but the road team is hard, and you got to be ready,
Yeah.
You got to know who they're going to throw to. You got to know who's run the ball. You got to know who's making tackles. Are they in that position they're normally playing? You look for differences from I usually go back. I try to watch at least 3 games of an opponent the week leading to the game. And then by the time the Bills game is here, you see they mostly are playing the same, but they change everything. They do anything different than they normally don't do. And that's what I look for in play-by-play. It's more difficult. It's more, I don't know, I found it to be more, I don't know, when you're color, there's certain themes that will take place every week for the Bills, for example.
Right.
And play-by-play, it's a totally different opponent and a totally different game.
Yeah, and I can piggyback off the guy whose name you just said. So, yes, I need to know the names. I need to know how to pronounce them, but
Yeah.
you have to have the quick recall. I can just piggyback off of you. Never was that more evident than when we first started calling preseason games together. And look, I was prepped before the games. I knew all the pronunciations, but that's a different animal when it's fourth quarter of a preseason game and a guy makes a tackle from the secondary of the opposing team and you rattle it right off. I'm still looking down at my sheet and looking for who it is, and you rattled it off. That was pretty convicting for me, which, look, that wasn't my job title. I wasn't paid, and I'm not paid to be the play-by-play guy. There's different responsibilities, but it was pretty convicting to me on how evident it was how much research you had done prior to the game. And with your hand-drawn charts where you're writing out each individual name on your big boards that you have in the booth, well, all that's to help commit those names to memory. Did you learn prep from Van Miller along the way?
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? The preseason games are hard. They're the hardest game we do are preseason.
I know.
Especially late in the game. I mean, there's no pace to the game. There's no there's very little. A team tried to win, but they really don't try to win, and it's hard to keep it interesting. And you really do have to keep it interesting. It's hard to follow the back and forth too. And players, guys who haven't played all year and won't play again, the guys who are driving trucks every week are in the game making tackles and making plays. You have to keep up with it as much as you can. It's hard. Yeah, I learned most of it from Van, and I figured out once I did about 10 or 12 hours of prep work per week. I usually watch 3 games, so there's 3 hours a game, there's 9 hours, and 3 or 4 hours at least of writing and research and reading about a team. I read the hometown newspaper about the opponents every week. But our job is different. If we're doing a network broadcast, as you did when you were doing colleges, you got 2 teams to learn. And our job, we basically have 1 team to learn, and we have our own opinions about the home team. We know them week to week, what they're doing.
Yeah, I always got a kick out when people would criticize us, and I might have paid attention to it earlier on than you did, earlier on in my career, which was later in yours with the amount of experience you had. But I would always get a kick out of when we would get criticism and they would say, well, you guys are homers. I said, we work for the Bills radio broadcast. Of course we're homers. We're supposed, when I got my job, they said, look, talk about the Bills 90% of the time. Yes, you got to talk about the other team some. You want to provide some perspective. If there's big storylines, week 1 last year, there's Aaron Rodgers out there. Of course, we're going to talk about all the guys they brought in, but that needs to be about 10% of the broadcast because you got to know your audience. And heck, that's vital information in anything in life, but we know our audience and we're going to speak to Bills fans. That doesn't mean we're not ever critical of the Bills, but yes, we are going to primarily talk about the Bills. And so I've had so many people, especially since you've announced that you're going to give up the play calling duties, say, Eric, why don't you become a play-by-play guy? And I say, look, guys like Murf, they cut their teeth in this business. They worked at the high school level. They built all the way up to where you see this finished product on Sundays with them calling games. I never did any of that. I wasn't a broadcasting major at one of these major universities. I wasn't, cutting my teeth in the business. I was playing football. I can provide great color, but there's no way, especially at this stage of the game, that I could just hop right over to the other seat and do play-by-play. So I commend you on all your hard work for that and really allowing me to do it for what I thought was a good job early on, especially because it's a hard transition, but it's a lot easier with a great play-by-play guy. We always say the play-by-play guys like the point guard to where the point to be made. And this is where anytime that I ever made a good point and someone say, wow, Eric, that was really good. Well, you set me up for it 90% of the time where you knew the point to be made. You could have made it yourself, but a great play-by-play guy then brings his color man in to then, slam dunk the alley-oop. So I always,
we're just getting good at that too. 4 years together. We're just getting to the point where I knew what you had said. I didn't know, but I was pretty confident in what you had said and what you were prepared to talk about. And it's unfortunate to walk away from it now, but you're good. You're good at it.
Well, you made it easy. You made it very easy to step in. I remember back to our first, I guess it was an audition, but I think I had the job already. When we called a game off of a TV in the Bills media room. Yeah. And, even with that, which you took the time out of your day to come call a game from the previous year. We were calling, a random Bills game from the year before. And I was just thinking to myself how much easier this is than previous auditions that I had done for networks, because one, your familiarity and my familiarity with the Bills, because even though I wasn't playing for the Bills the previous year, I was following along with them. And then two, how much you just set me up along the way to where I'm not even hardly having to think of original ideas to interject. It's, hey, that was a great play by, let's call it Von Miller now off the edge. Eric, commentate on that. Okay, well, that's easy for me to do in that moment. But if the play ends and you say, Eric, what you see there? Well, that's open-ended. I got 7 seconds. That's going to be tough for me to really narrow that down unless I'm super prepped on that. So I always appreciated that. I'm interested because I never got to spend time with Van Miller. How much fun was it working with him? He just seemed from afar, and then all the stories, like he was just a character.
Yeah, he was. It was, first of all, it was a tremendous learning experience. And I didn't go in with a list of questions for Van or things to ask him about. But if you paid attention, you would learn things. You would learn what he was talking about. But once the game started, he was so into it, and you get me into it, and you fall into it, kind of a habit. You get in the habit of doing the game. He made it so we would shut everything down before kickoff. We'd forget about everything almost and just say game. And that was maybe the biggest I learned from how important each game was. It's the NFL. There's only 16 games or 14 sometimes when I'm doing with Van, and every game matters. And he kind of taught me that, I think, without actually teaching me that, but showed me that every game matters, even if you're not winning that year. The games are important and they mean something to somebody.
Yeah, they do, and you can't take any of them off. And you don't know when your boss is watching that one. You just don't know throughout the season when those big moments are going to come, when this is going to be the pivotal game, and so you got to prep for them all the same, even the preseason ones, because those are the real tough ones, as we talked about earlier. Let's give a quick shout out to Prime, #1 sports drink on the planet right now. Go out and get yours today. We got the Buffalo Bills colored one here in front of me, the ice pop flavor. My kids love that one. From our time calling games together, Murf, or actually, let's just go any game that you called. Is there one that specifically stands out to you?
Well, they coincide. There were a game that you and I did, and it was a loss for the Bills, but they lost at Kansas City in a playoff game and gave up a lead with 13 seconds to go. That game was incredible. It went back and forth and back and forth, and Mahomes versus Josh Allen, they were just throwing a haymaker at each other, and the Bills kicked it off with the lead with 13 seconds left to play and lost it. Hard to believe, but they lost it in overtime, and it was a great game. It was it didn't hit me until after the game what a great game it was. I mean, the game was over. I was done. I went and grabbed a few beers for us. We had a few beers, but what happened was it wasn't until the next day I had to do a talk show on GR Radio, and they were talking about the game, and I said, "Holy cow!" I knew they lost. Make no mistake about it. I knew they lost, but it didn't affect me until the next day. I said, man, they lost that game. They had the game won until there was 13 seconds to go. It was incredible. And I came home and watched it. And I watch every game, but watch that one once at least, I think a couple times. It just hit me what an important game that was. It's a great game. Not taking away anything from how great the Bills played that day, but it was a very, very difficult loss to accept.
Yeah, it was. And that's likely my most memorable game as well. In the late fourth quarter of that game, that's also the most animated, not on air, but animated in the booth that I think I ever was. I mean, we were high-fiving, we were fist pumping. the Cincinnati Bengals had already beat the Titans, who were the 1 seed. So whoever won that game was going to host the AFC Championship game. And in my mind, the Bills were about to host the AFC Championship game in Buffalo against my hometown team in the Bengals. I'm not a fan of the Bengals per se anymore, but my hometown team coming to Buffalo. And I thought about that about 3 different times as we took the lead late, and to see that one slip through was so tough. But man, the emotion that came with it. And what people don't understand is, yes, we are calling the game. We're also fans of the Bills, but calling a broadcast is exhausting. I mean, we do roundtable before the game. That's an hour from, for a 1 o'clock game, that's 11 to 12. We're doing an hour of work then. We're prepping in the booth prior to then. It's a long day. And then you're mentally engaged for 3+ hours. That one lasted over 4, I believe. So you're so mentally exhausted by the end of the game. And then you're constantly worried about, or you're constantly concerned about what you're going to say next. What's the next read coming up? Have we done enough shout outs to the Northtown Automotive or the Northtown Bank broadcast booth? So you have all that going on. Sometimes you don't quite understand the ramifications of the product of what's going on. Yes, you're in the moment and you show emotion, but it's hard in those moments. That was a big one for me too. What people don't realize is, especially if they visited us in the Northwest Bank broadcast booth in Buffalo, how great our booth is in Buffalo and how non-great it can be on the road sometimes. Do you have a least favorite booth on the road to call a game from?
Yeah, I do. It wasn't this way always, but Miami is terrible.
Oh, awful.
We're set up in the end zone, in the corner of the end zone, and we look at the game from the wrong angle that you're watching at home on TV. So that's one problem. You can't see. They get the line. You can't see what's going on out there. I don't know, on that 5-yard line to 15-yard line. It's just terrible. And it didn't have to be that way. And I've complained about it to the Dolphins, but to no avail. It's awful. I mean, Washington is bad too, but we're almost at the same spot in Washington. But we don't go there as often. But once a year we go to Miami and have a game like that. It makes me sick to my stomach too. I won't miss that place at all.
Yeah, and it's also closed off with the glass, and it's always hot in there. We're sweating, we're cramped, but it's closed off. And I hate the booths that are closed off to the atmosphere. It's hard to get in the game. Kansas City's the exact same way, where we're literally inside. I mean, we could be calling it off a screen at home, and it would feel about the same, and we'd have a better view of the game, actually, from each of them. Kansas City's is, 8 stories high we're calling the game from, which – from an X's and O's standpoint, it's nice to see the plays develop, but it's really hard. I mean, before the game, and this is something people probably don't realize, like when you're that far away, it's hard to even see the numbers. So we're looking at running backs. Okay, this week, at the time, Devin Singletary's got a white sleeve on his right arm. James Cook doesn't have anything on his arms this week, or he's wearing 2 sleeves. So that's a way to identify him. Diggs always kind of stands out, even just the way he moves and whatnot. But, you can – this year with Knox and Kincaid. Okay, this week, Kincaid's got a sleeve on. Okay, that's a way to differentiate that 86 from the 88 because they're just so far away. Let's take a quick pause to give a shout out to one of our sponsors. That's Dan-O's Seasoning. Best seasoning in the game. If you want to elevate your meals to Pro Bowl status, add some Dan-O's to it. It brings the heat with natural ingredients and unbeatable flavor. There's over 10 million fans nationwide. Make sure you join them today. It's the go-to choice for winning dishes. And we already bragged on the Bills broadcast booth, so you can't say that. Do you have a favorite away booth to call games at?
I like New England, believe it or not.
I know you do.
And again, we're there all the time, but it's low. It's high enough so you can see everything, but low enough so you can feel everything. I don't know if it makes sense to people. You feel and you hear everything. And I like being that close to the crowd. I mean, we have conversations during the grocery break with people in the stands. Hey, how's that beer? How's that chicken wing going? That kind of thing. I really like New England. It's a good place. And now the Bills have success down there. It's an even better place to do a game from.
Yeah, except for with the Bills' success in New England comes the fans trash talking us because we're projecting into the microphone so they can hear us. We're right behind them. And over the last couple of years, I've had my fair share of words with New England fans as they've looked back and out, kind of pointed at the field and the on-field product. The Bills take care of all my trash talking for me. But it's that booth. There's been some issues with the fans talking trash because they're literally. They're 2 feet from us in the broadcast booth. We
Maybe
have.
you gotta go out. Maybe you gotta go out and see how they are. Check on them.
I know. And look, if you went back through my text messages with my wife throughout the games, there's been many times I've wanted to go out there and have a face-to-face conversation, because it's very easy for people to be talking trash to you from their seats, knowing that I can't come out and do anything. I'm there working. But it's like anything in life, social media, wherever, people these days just think they can say, and this is what drives me nuts about society nowadays. You just feel like you could say anything you want to somebody with there being no ramifications from it. And I'm like, look, one, I'm here doing my job, like relax. And two, if I come out of this booth, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. Like, and you do realize that, right? Like I have the ability to do that. I don't feel like losing my job here or going to jail, but lucky for you, I care about both those things, and you're safe today. And then I even have to be careful. And so, because, anything could be on video that I say to them. So I actually started videotaping them throughout the game, which it's amazing. You pull out a camera and start videoing somebody from the booth. It's amazing how quickly they shut up, even though, no one's going to know who they are when I blast them on social media. But yeah, I appreciate the view from that stadium. I love New England's soundtrack throughout the game as well. They have a great mix.
Music. Best music in the NFL.
I agree 100%. But the trash talking from the fans gets me a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. People may or may not realize this, but half the fun of calling the games when we go on the road is going out to eat in different cities, trying, crab cakes when you go to Baltimore or barbecue when you go to Kansas City. Did you have a favorite city, a favorite meal maybe in a different town that we would go to broadcast wise?
I usually go out more than I did in the last few years, but I always like, again, New England, because we stay in Providence.
Yep.
And Providence is a great city for Italian restaurants. There's a whole Italian neighborhood there. There's 3 or 4 Italian restaurants that are great. I love them. Providence is good. Miami can be good, although not so much anymore. I like Seattle. We only get Seattle once in a while, but I always have a great meal in Seattle. I really like Seattle a lot.
Yeah, I didn't get to go out to eat the last time we were in Seattle, and then I ended up breaking my leg on Monday Night Football. But the Bills go out. That was in 2016. The Bills go out, so that 8 years later we go out there this year. So I'll get to partake in a nice Seattle meal this time around. I'll report back what I come up with out there. Over the years, you've done so many countless interviews with Bills players, Bills coaches. Was there maybe one coach, personality-wise, that stood out to you that you always just, whether it was a great rapport, just had a lot of fun with?
Rex had huge personality, huge.
Right.
But he couldn't, I don't know if I didn't trust him or what. I just didn't believe what he was saying all the time. He was huge personality, though. He was unbelievable, and he was funny and all that. And we all know that. I really like Mike Mularkey a lot. He was only here for 2 years. Mike Mularkey lived nearby where I live, and so we'd see it on once in a while. And I thought he was really smart. And did a good job as much as he could back when the Bills were kind of a mess. He inherited some of the staff that he had, which didn't work out. I think he pulled the plug too quickly. But I really like Mike Mularkey a lot. And Sean is good. Sean, not like Rex, but he does every once in a while. Well, actually, Sean has more to say often when we're not doing the interview. I really liked him when he wasn't being interviewed. When he was interviewed, everything was guarded and close to the vest. But personally, he was a pretty good guy.
Yeah, he is. He's a tremendous person. And when I would take over the duties to do the pregame interview with Coach McDermott, I would always allot 45 minutes into my schedule for it. It's only a 5-minute recording interview.
That's right.
But if Coach had time extra, well, then immediately when we'd stop recording, he'd say, "Hey, how's your family doing? How's Leslie doing? What are the kids into now? What sports are they in?" Yep. And I'd ask him about his kids. And, so I would always allot 45 minutes, because you can't put something right on the back of it, because Coach McDermott would always like to have a conversation. I've also heard great things about Mularkey over the years, and very, very strong reputation in Buffalo amongst, trainers and people that had been around the building for a long time. They always loved Mularkey. Was there a player that stood out to you over the years that just had a great rapport with, and let's say like when they were with the Bills, because I know me and you, got closer as time went on with me hopping in the broadcast, Alex Van Pelt also as well, Kelso. But was there a guy, a Bills player that you just always look forward to getting to interview?
Well, I always like Fitz. I like Ryan Fitzpatrick a lot. He, it's funny, last week when I announced my retirement, he recorded something that the Bills put up on a video, and I texted a thank you to him and other players and coaches who did it. And before I even sent it to him, a second after I sent it to him, the phone rang and it was Fitz on the phone. And he called and we talked for a half hour. He's great. He's a great guy. I've lost touch with, I'm sorry to say, but I always liked him. I always, I felt he and I connected, and when I asked him a question that he didn't consider fair, he would tell me, which I appreciate that. And he was great. I'd say Fitz is probably number one in my book.
Yeah, Fitz is one of my favorite teammates as well. And
remember the time, the famous game, the playoff game at home when he was with his shirt, no shirt. But remember later that day, he came in our booth, and I was doing play, and he hugged me from behind. I was
right in the middle of the call.
Yeah, right in the middle of the call. It didn't matter if we were on the air or not.
Oh, he's the best. Great. Yeah, and he truly does love you. I can attest to that, and I know that for a fact. All right, last one from me. What will you miss most about your role that you're now giving up with the Bills, and hopefully you're still around? And I don't want this to say it seemed like it's a goodbye forever, but what will you miss most about calling the games?
Well, I'll miss you, and I think we're in the process of developing an even better chemistry and a better rapport.
I agree.
And I miss the games. There's all kinds of stuff that you do before the game, after the game, and it means something and it matters. But I really like the 1:00 kickoff for games. And for those 3 hours, it's total escapism. You just escape to a whole other world, and nothing matters during those 3 hours of those games. And that's what I'll miss most of all, I think. The fact that the game is, and every game matters, by the way. Even the ones that don't matter in some issue, but every game is important and every game matters. I'll miss those 3 hours of doing the games.
Well, I hope you're in the booth in some capacity for us with those 3 hours. And I'll miss calling games with you. I agree. I think we were hitting our stride. I think we started out great. And we had so much fun in those first. I think they were playing 4 preseason games still at the time. And I believe I came up for the blue and white scrimmage. So we had a number of games prior to that regular season starting, but I had no idea what kind of an animal calling a preseason game was. And, that fourth quarter where it's not even necessarily about the on-field product. And you told me about Yogi Berra-isms where I was saying, I guess Yogi Berra-ism, and the audience can look it up for a better definition, but I was basically saying the same thing twice that meant the same thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had done that and I didn't know it. So we start cracking up. We're dying laughing as I'm looking these up during the commercial break. Well, then we come back and we're still half laughing. And, we were just having fun with it. And afterwards they said, man, that was a great fourth quarter because the on-field product wasn't that good. And I said, oh, we can have fun doing this too. This isn't
it can be fun.
Yeah, this doesn't have to be a stale broadcast. And from there, I felt like I don't know. I just felt like early in that preseason, we started having fun, and I just looked forward to every Sunday working with you. Whew. Oh, man. I didn't think it was going to hit me like that. But I hope you're still around for the broadcast because it means a lot, even on Sundays this year when you're in there and Mark's spotting for us in between. So make sure you're around this year, Murf.
I will, Eric. I love working with you. I will miss working with you, and it was a tremendous opportunity. We had 4 good colormen over the years, and you were by far the best.
Oh, I appreciate those words, Murf. Thank you. I hope to have you as a fairly regular on this show because I know this episode will blow up because everyone loves hearing from you, and people always enjoyed our banter on the air. So I appreciate the time, and we'll do this again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.